Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Sports today on a beautiful Wednesday morning. It is me, Joey P, Joe P. Zapia, taking you through the next 2 hours here, and Craig Mish and Davis Maddock both off today. However, I am not alone. My good pal George Kurtz is going to join me for the next 2 hours, talking everything in fantasy sports that you possibly need to get to. We've got a lot of baseball to get to, obviously, from last night's games, previewing the upcoming games today, and a lot of football news as well. George Kurtz, poor George Kurtz, gets stuck with me the day after a Yankee playoff loss. George, I'm sorry. This is the hand that you were dealt, but you're going to have to play it for the next 2 hours.
Oh, I'll be okay. I'll manage somehow. I did think the Yankees would win last night before the game. I thought they'd have a good shot here. But that being said, as I said many times, that was as far as they were going. I think Tampa Bay would have wiped the floor with them, which they've done pretty much for the past couple of years. So it is what it is. I'm probably more disappointed at, once again, how they played. Cole didn't pitch well. They didn't hit again. That sort of thing. Weird game last night at Fenway when you think about it, right? Stanton, everybody thinks that ball is gone, his first at bat, but really it wasn't even close to gone. And it's not gone in any ballpark. It was a dying fly ball, hit midway up the monster on the way down. The second one, though, is gone in any ballpark. Monster stopped it. And then the third home run is not gone in any ballpark either. Wraps around the pesky pole. Just a weird night all around.
Yeah, definitely. But it's same old Yankees, George, a team that has struggled to produce runs without hitting home runs for many years now. And this has been the problem with the Yankees when you get into one-game playoffs or short series for quite some time. If they're not hitting home runs, they are a station-to-station team. They don't create runs very well. And this is not news to Yankee fans. Certainly not news to us covering the Yankees for the last few years. But that's not the only headline. So let's get to the rest of them here on Wednesday. The Red Sox did beat the Yankees 6-2 in that AL wildcard game. Dave Roberts, the Dodger manager, hopes that Max Muncy can return by the end of the month. Cowboys release linebacker Jalen Smith, former second-round pick. He had been working in a rotation, but Jalen Smith is now out, which means probably more snaps for Micah Parsons, who has played outstanding football so far early on in his career, in his first few weeks as an NFL player. And speaking of big defensive news, the Patriots release cornerback Stephon Gilmore, former Defensive Player of the Year in 2019. Gilmore, top 5 cornerback in the league, George, for quite some time. This saves the Patriots $6 million in cap. It's kind of curious, the move here. The defense has played very well. J.C. Jackson's played very well. I guess they feel they can continue on without him. I know there's a team that had a need at cornerback who just cleared a lot of money and then signed Richard Sherman. Do you think that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wish they had waited just another week, George?
Oh, that won't stop them. They're going to inquire about Gilmore. That makes a lot of sense for him to go there. They're decimated at cornerback. I mean, they are. I think that this is not a joke. I think they were one injury away Sunday night from Ronald Jones being a cornerback. All right, that's what was reported out there. That's how thin they are. Everyone's getting hurt there, so they'll have to inquire. Question: does he want to go there? I think the 49ers will be interested. The Cowboys will be interested. They just cleared some room too, right? So we'll see here. But he's going to have his choice. My biggest question is this. All right, you wanted to restructure the contract. You couldn't get it done. Why didn't you trade him? You could have gotten something for him. You did not have to release him for nothing.
You know what, George? I think we've learned something in the NFL the last couple of years, which is sometimes the trade value nowadays with draft picks just isn't there. Sometimes it's better to take the cap relief and just take it than necessarily move a player and then get more draft picks or a 6th-round pick, which really doesn't mean too much to most teams nowadays. I think that's kind of where things are headed. That draft capital, especially early draft capital, is so useful. Every now and then you get a team that kind of does bite a little bit, but even though Gilmore is a fantastic player, a great corner, we all know this, it's a player who's injured, a player who's not going to, get off the pup until week 6, I believe, anyway. And at the same time, George, I mean, you're in a spot here where you may, as the Patriots, be looking to add things. I think there was a very encouraging loss, if you can be encouraged in a loss, for Mac Jones and the Patriots. I think there's a lot you could take out of that. The 19 straight completions from Mac Jones against a pretty stout defense. I think there's a lot you like there. Do you think in a way this is the Patriots kind of clearing space maybe to add more offensive players at the trade deadline? Do you think this is maybe that sort of a move here?
Adding offensive players at the trade deadline generally doesn't work. It takes too long to know the system. In any system, it's not for just the Patriots, any team. You get a wide receiver, you got to learn the system. It takes time. You got to get chemistry at the quarterback. You can't get that in season. You just can't. And so it's difficult to do that. Could that be the idea? Maybe. Maybe. Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if they try and get somebody. We do see now. When I say we see more trades in the NFL at the deadline, well, we so used to see none. So one would be more trades, right? But I don't think we'll see anything anywhere near, the NHL, NBA, Major League Baseball. Nothing, nowhere near that. But we'll see more, and maybe the Patriots do have their eye on someone that they needed. Listen, if that's the case, that's fine. But still, I think you would have got more than a six, by the way, for Gilmore. This is not some, so at the end of his career player, this guy's good. So I think they would have done better than that. And I'm certainly not the only one speculating that why they didn't try and trade him. I think there's something else going on here that we probably don't know about. Maybe we never will.
Mhm.
But it's just a weird move for me.
Well, the Patriots are also the kings of getting rid of players before their expiration date. Historically, you could go back to Richard Seymour, or you could go back to Deion Branch. You can go back to many, many players for many, many years on both sides of the football who they let go, and everybody said, "Why are they letting that guy go?" Only never to be really heard of in any sort of useful way again. So that's also something. It's kind of like when the Rays give up on a pitcher, George. I feel like that's when the Patriots give up on anybody. Everybody should be a little bit more concerned. All right, we're just getting started here on Sports Grid on Fantasy Sports today. When George and I return, we're going to play a little game of trade or trust, and I'm going to trust that George Kurtz is going to bring the heat as always. So we're just getting started here. We'll be right back after this. So don't go anywhere. For Fantasy Sports today, right after.
You gotta admit, we make it stupid easy for you. Just listen. You get expert information 7 days a week. We're beginning to think you ought to share. This is the Sports Grid Radio Network.
SportsGrid.com. Betting insights and entertainment at your fingertips 24/7 as our team covers the most important topics in sports wagering. Real-time odds, predictive betting models, expert picks, and more. Want the edge? Then get on the grid. SportsGrid.com.
To trade or trust? That question we must always ask ourselves when playing any fantasy, but in fantasy football, week to week can be quite volatile. And George Kurtz and I are going to try to go through some players here on Fantasy Sports today, right here on Sports Grid, and figure out if we're going to trade or trust some of these guys coming off intriguing week fours for different reasons. Some good, some bad. So, George, are you ready to play? Have you put in the hours? Have you put in the work? Are you ready, my friend?
All morning been studying for this. All morning. I'm ready.
All right.
Maybe.
Good. I don't want you to fail any tests here, George. That's what I want. Let's start with AB, Antonio Brown, one of Tom Brady's favorite guys who hangs out at Tom Brady's house. The two of them have sleepovers together, do each other's hair, have popcorn, the whole thing there. It's a beautiful relationship between AB and Tom Brady. Last week, 7 receptions for him in week 4, 63 yards, no touchdowns, although we do know that there was that moment where a touchdown was quite close. He dropped that ball there that was put perfect spot. I think had it not been raining, maybe we'd be talking about this day a little differently. Maybe this day becomes, 8 receptions for 100 yards with a touchdown and 11 targets. But alas, it's the 11 targets that I'm looking at. And I know it's very difficult, George, because when you're dealing with these Tampa Bay wide receivers, any given week, it feels like could be Godwin, could be Evans. But now that Gronk is out, does that kind of level the playing field just a bit more? How do you feel about Antonio Brown right now going forward? Would you trade him, or do you trust to keep him the rest of the season?
Well, anybody can be traded, right? If the right offer comes along, I'll move anybody. That doesn't bother me at all. But in this context, what we're going for here, I'm going to trust him. Gronk is part of it, sure. That should spread out the targets. But the thing is, you saw those stats, right? 7 catches, 11 targets there. He's getting his shots. All right, he's getting his shots, and that's all I can ask for. That's all I can ask for. He's not going to see double coverage a whole lot because of the other guys you mentioned, Evans, Godwin here. Can't double them all. Right, and Brady's going to go to him. Brady wanted him on that team, so he's going to be okay. I don't think he's going to be a superstar. I don't think he's going to fit the season as a wide receiver 1, but a solid wide receiver 2, and you didn't even draft him at that. You're going to return value for him for his services. So I'm good with Antonio Brown as far as the fantasy football life is concerned.
I'm going to trust him as well. I drafted Antonio Brown as a wide receiver 4 as a value on many, many teams. And this is 12-team leagues too. And a lot of people were just afraid. And meanwhile, you had to pay like top 13, 14 overall price for guys like Godwin and Evans earlier in the season, but you did not have to do that with Antonio Brown. And to me, he had the exact same upside for stats as the other two guys, just at a far less cost. And I think so far you're still seeing that AB is very useful. I know he had that week where he missed there because of COVID and he missed that game, but back last week against New England, certainly a good showing for him, regardless of missing that touchdown. And I'm with George. I'm keeping him. Although I am a little concerned. You said you would trade anybody, George. Now I'm wondering why I'm here and Mish is not and Davis is not. Starts to make you think, doesn't it? Just
Got
maybe
good
that
deals.
trade offer came in. Yeah, I'm a little unsettled. I hope the rest of the show goes well, George. All right, let's move on to the running back position. And there's a guy named Zach Moss who was inactive week 1, but after that, all of a sudden, starting to show some signs of life. He's got a great matchup this week against Kansas City, a team that's given up quite a bit of rushing yards already on the season to opposing RBs. In week 4, 61 rushing yards, no receptions, no receiving yards, but he did have a touchdown. Now, George, this guy keeps finding the end zone, and that's a very important thing. We keep losing running backs on a weekly basis in fantasy football, or maybe an hourly basis on Sundays, and it's become very difficult. Zach Moss is a player who I think we can all agree maybe the ceiling is limited, but with the floor that he's got, and that's back-to-back games with 60 yards rushing, and he's also now have 4 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks since he was inactive week 1. Are you trading or trusting Zach Moss?
Well, once again, you said it, right? Any running back with a pulse who's breathing has value right about now, right? So you can't just say blindly trade the guy. I do have him in a league or two. In one league, I'm lucky. I haven't had any of the running backs get hurt that are on that roster. So yeah, I'm moving them. I'm trying to move them outside of that, trying to sell high. See if I can get a better player than what I think he'll be the rest of the season. But as you say, trading in fantasy is much harder than it used to be when you and I first started playing. No one wants to trade anymore unless they think they're winning the deal. No one ever wants to make a fair deal. It's very difficult to get it done. But to answer this question, I'm trading him. I think it's tough to rely on that touchdown deodorant week in and week out. Plus, he's got competition there, right? Singletary's there. Josh Allen's eventually going to steal some of these touchdowns as well. And this team's going to roll for a while. The schedule's not all that brutal here. So I am trading Moss if my roster allows it. Which is, for most people, it probably doesn't. You probably need Moss to be a running back 2, or maybe your flex at the very least. So I'm trading him, but you may not be able to.
Well, I would say this. I'm willing to trade him in a package to get a better running back who has struggled. So if maybe I'm getting an Antonio Gibson, or if I'm taking a shot on a running back who hasn't been great out of the gate, this is the perfect candidate who's right now, like George is saying, giving you those touchdowns has been a huge bonus, but you can't count on them every single week. That is for sure. And he's just giving you 60 yards and very little in the passing game. That's something to be concerned with. So I think George makes a really good point there. But outside of that, you probably have to keep him as a flex RB, especially with all the bye weeks coming up. It feels like Zach Moss probably is going to be more useful to most owners as opposed to more useful trading him. But I think if you package him along with a wide receiver of note, you might be able to improve something else. If indeed you did get lucky and you're one of the few that still has enough running backs to actually start any given week. Looking at Moss's upcoming schedule as well. He has Kansas City this week, then at Tennessee. Not very good defense there. Miami's defense certainly reeling a little bit these last few weeks. Then Jacksonville, the Jets, the Colts, New Orleans. Later on, he does have New England twice and Tampa, so it does get a little tougher. But this stretch run here for Moss is intriguing a little bit. I don't know how intrigued you are, George, by our next guy here, and it's Kenny Golladay of the Giants. Week 4 stats for him. 6 receptions, 116 yards, no touchdowns in this affair, but he was targeted 7 times. Now, this was a good showing here for Kenny Golladay. However, this was also a showing for Kenny Golladay where there were 2 huge pieces that were not on the field. No Sterling Shepard, no Darius Slayton. So is that what it takes to get Kenny Golladay actually active and useful in fantasy, George? And is this the window that people have to sell on Kenny Golladay and get out from underneath him, because it might not get much better than this all year for him?
Well, listen, I don't know if it get much better than 118 yards. That's true, and I think there is something to the fact that yes, no Slayton, no Shepard. Well, target's got to go to somebody, and Golladay picked up. Mm-hmm. But I also think there's something to the fact that even Golladay said this during preseason. It's going to take a little while for him to be acclimated to the offense. For the offense to be good as a whole. Right, Barkley didn't play most of camp, right? They had problems on the offensive line. Golladay was banged up, so was Tony. So I think there is something to that as well, that it could all be a coincidence, Joe. Where hey, they all just happen to the same week the injuries. Now I don't really believe in coincidence, but it could be The same week as the injuries is the same week that Galladay shows up here. The Giants are likely going to have to pass a bunch this year, even with Galladay. Even if Barkley does become the Barkley of old here, they're going to have to score points. I sort of want to trust Galladay. There's a reason they brought him there. They need that big play guy. I think he's going to be the red zone guy as well, which is really why I'm interested here. I want to trust him, but I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to stamp my feet down on it. And he's going to be the guy here, but I want to trust Galladay.
All right, well, let's see how much you trust him. Let's throw some names out there and see who you trust more. Let's start with Robbie Anderson, wide receiver with a fair amount of talent. Slow start. Kenny Galladay for you. All right, how about the often targeted but never scoring Jacoby Myers of the New England Patriots or Kenny Galladay?
I'm still going to go Galladay, but I think Myers is a safer play. I do think he's a safer play. Galladay will have bigger games.
Well, that's the question I was going to ask you, George, because it feels like Myers is the weekly floor you can believe in, but once again, he's not catching touchdowns. I mean, he's thrown for more touchdowns in the NFL career than he has receiving touchdowns, which is stunning. But that's the thing. Do you value the floor on a weekly basis or the potential upside but potential downside of a guy like Kenny Galladay?
Probably depends on your team, right? What are you looking for? You want to be stable? Or do you need that upside? My team's so. You need that upside. I think it's team dependent. I'm going to go with Galladay.
All right. So George, not stomping his feet too hard. We don't want to shake the camera too much here over on Sports Grid. No, don't shake it, George. Don't shake it. But that's some little trade or trust with George and myself. When we come back, we're going to hit the waiver wire because it's Wednesday. We got to add some players to our rosters because goodness knows there's plenty of injuries. We'll be right back here on Sports Grid right after this.
SportsGrid.com. Betting insights and entertainment at your fingertips 24/7 as our team covers the most important topics in sports wagering. Real-time odds, predictive betting models, expert picks, and more. Want the edge? Then get on the grid. SportsGrid.com.
Now, hopefully you haven't blown all of your free agent acquisition budget quite yet, and you have a little bit more in the tank to spend this week because we all know we need to. A lot of running back injuries, some questions there. We'll get to that in a bit, but also some free agent quarterbacks have been hitting the wire as well. That might be very useful, even those single quarterback leagues to talk about. And of course, you can never, ever stop looking for a useful tight end. And George Kurtz, let's start here with the quarterbacks. Certainly, Mac Jones, I think, proved to everybody that he is starting to get it. He looked really good in those progressions. We'll start with him. He's out there on the waiver wire. Great matchup this week against Houston. Then you've got Zach Wilson against Atlanta. Taylor Heineke looked like Steve Young in that game. That is absolutely something to look forward to. So Zach Wilson, I never know how teams are going to react or players are going to go react to having to travel to London. That's always a weird thing. It's a neutral field. It's a lot of travel. It's a time difference. There's a lot of problems there with this one, but the positive is it's the Atlanta Falcons. And of course, there's Trey Lance against the Arizona Cardinals, who we're not definitive on quite yet. And I know we have to start with Trey Lance because he probably is the biggest potential league winner, I think, of this group. So in Superflex, all these guys are already rostered. We don't even have to talk about the Superflex leagues. This is already a fact. But in those single quarterback leagues or those deeper leagues where you're in a 14-team league or something like that, these guys are all, I think, in that conversation at the very least, especially Trey Lance. So whether or not he starts this week, is the writing on the wall here for Jimmy Garoppolo, in your opinion? Is this the time if Trey Lance is still out there on the waiver wire, even if he doesn't start this week? Would you be putting free agent budget on Trey Lance? And if so, George, how much? What is your approach to Lance in that single QB format?
What does all these guys have in common? All rookie quarterbacks. Look at that. Your last question, would I put any free agent budget on quarterbacks? No, almost never do. All right, because if all these three guys are available, I doubt all three are going. I'll just take the one that's left over anyway. What do I care? Trey Lance is probably the biggest risk because we don't know if he's starting this week. All right, we don't know. Also, we heard after last week the 49ers weren't planning on anywhere close to having him in a game yet. That he, as a starter, that he wasn't ready for it. If that's true, that's not good. That they don't think he's ready to be an NFL quarterback yet. I know he had in the his limited playing time on Sunday, he had about 20 fantasy points, depending on how your league hands out those points. They weren't great. I mean, one of those things, nobody covered Deebo Samuel. You or I could have completed that pass. All right, now literally, hey, we're not going to cover the guy on the outside. Maybe he won't see him. All right, he runs in, a 76-yard touchdown there. And so that's a big part of his production that came from one play that is not going to happen again. Or it's highly unlikely to happen again. So keep Lois in mind. Plus, you're up against the hot Arizona team. So I would probably go with one of the other two. Can you go wrong going against Houston right now? All right, come on. That's a bad team. They what are they going to do? 1-2 games? They're going to give up points. You're going to get points there. I would actually like Zach Wilson against Atlanta a lot, if not the fact of what you just went over. It's over the pond there, across the pond there in England. I don't know how they're going to play it, with all those distractions there. But Atlanta's terrible too. They, you said it, General Heineke. I don't know where that's from, but it sounds good. I like it. He looked great last week, right? Also, he's putting up fantasy production up the wazoo. Zach Wilson may do the exact same. He had a big game versus Tennessee last week. Maybe he's finally figured it out somewhat. And against Atlanta, I said I don't think it's going to hurt you at all here. So if I had to rank these guys, it probably is how it's listed: Jones, Wilson, Lance. They all do have some value. I just think Lance is probably the biggest risk. He's playing the tougher team. He may not even start. I'm looking up now. Jimmy G, calf contusion. He'll be evaluated again today. West Coast, they haven't done that yet. It's only 9:30 there, so we're still waiting to hear, but he might start that game. Jimmy G, playing Dr. Jimmy G, said, going to be out multiple weeks. He may not even be out this week.
Well, let me spin this a different way for you then, George. 20 fantasy points for Trey Lance in a half of football, right? And you look at the 41 rushing yards, and people start to, obviously, especially fantasy dorks, all of us, which is what we are, a lot of them get very excited about that. Is there any situation where you try to add him and you look to a team that's maybe got a Tannehill, maybe there's somebody struggling or upcoming buys? And is Trey Lance a very marketable trade chip potentially as well that maybe is worth, instead of maybe free agent budget, maybe you don't need anything in particular, but you're at you're in a good spot with the waiver wire claims this week and you can add Trey Lance to your roster? Does he become interesting at least to add as a potential trade chip to improve your roster somewhere else?
And then nothing to lose there, which you're putting up, I'll play him and see if I can move him. Sure, why not? You got nothing to lose. You can release him next week, or you can release him on Sunday for somebody else, before the games if you need somebody. So I'm okay with that. But we've seen this before, all right, all through the years. Guys, I'm going to claim 18 quarterbacks and I'll just trade them after. It generally doesn't work. Trading nowadays is so difficult. This is not like when I first started playing. Trading used to be a big part of fantasy. We love to trade. You'd be on the phone, we had, or real phone, dialing with your friends all day long. This is before I had cell phones, because you were working trades here, right? Before texting, before emails. It was maybe the part I enjoyed most about in a fantasy league is talking trades with my friends. But now that doesn't happen anymore because no one wants to make a fair trade anymore.
Well, George, I feel like that's true. That is the biggest problem. Nobody wants to make a good trade where everybody wins. They only want to be the winner, which is a terrible way
to approach trades. It's your fault, Joe.
Well, they're afraid of me anyway, and they're afraid of you. And the leagues that you and I play in right now, also very difficult because, a lot more analysts and people like that are in them. So that's a very difficult thing to do. But I think for the casual players, this kind of pick up Lance and flip him, I always feel like players are always worth more on their potential than they are sometimes in reality. And as George is saying, look, in your single quarterback league, if you can add Trey Lance and flip him, you can even sell him potentially on the concept of what he's got coming up later in the year, if indeed he is the starting quarterback, because you've got Seattle, Cincinnati, Atlanta, Tennessee, and Houston over his last 5 games. So whatever the playoffs are or that stretch run into the playoffs, my goodness, that's a really good schedule for the 49ers potentially at the quarterback position, if indeed he does take over. But I do agree with you, George. I think that Mac Jones is probably that guy, the one that you want to certainly focus on this week if you need a streamer for any reason there. Also, we have got some injuries too. We're still waiting to update on Teddy Bridgewater. They say he's progressing pretty well, so that's a positive thing for Teddy B. We don't have definitive news if it's going to be him or Drew Lock this week, but we'll certainly keep you up to date with all of that news here on Sports Grid as it breaks. Let's switch gears for a second and let's go to the tight end position. Now, the first guy here on the list is Dawson Knox, who on the Fantasy Pros Waiver Wire podcast last week, I was imploring people to please add Dawson Knox. My goodness, please. and nobody really listened, at least not enough people. A lot of people who lost Gronk listened, and they picked him up, and weren't they happy with the 2 touchdowns they gave him. Kansas City is the matchup this week on the road. Then you got Hunter Henry against Houston, Dan Arnold at Tennessee, versus Tennessee, and then Juwan Johnson at Washington. So tight end is extraordinarily difficult. We all know this. And at the same time, I think there's a part of us that, every other year we know that we're looking for guys that we can pluck off the waiver wire and maybe be a tight end one the rest of the season. Dawson Knox right now looks like that guy, George. Is this a mirage? And how aggressive should people be on this if they think it's not?
I don't think it's a mirage. That being said, I don't think obviously he's not going to keep this pace up here. But maybe once again, teams are really paying attention to Diggs more. It's opening up room for Knox. So I've had Knox on teams before because generally there have been times where I've been desperate at tight end. I did not see this coming, and I'm afraid I didn't listen to you either last week. The one league I had Gronk, I could have grabbed Knox. He was available. I got Dalton Schultz instead. I went for my hometown Cowboys. I'm not complaining about it. But
well, Schultz was okay too. Those were the two guys, George. I think Schultz and Knox are the guys, and I thought Jarwin was going to be that guy, but clearly they've gone back to Dalton Schultz. We'll talk about him in a second because he's not on the list, but he's probably still available in a lot of leagues. But Knox so far these last few weeks, 5 targets, 4 receptions against the Washington football team, 8 targets, 5 receptions last week against the Houston Texans. He has 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games. And look, if you score a touchdown, you're a tight end one. But I think what's encouraging is you're seeing a steady target volume, at least 4 targets in 3 of his first 4 games of the season for Dawson Knox.
Yeah, and like I said, you already went through the schedule when we talked, I think, about Moss there. It's not overly hard. You got Kansas City this week. We assume there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game. Kansas City can't stop anybody. So, yeah, Knox is definitely, if he's out there, he's got to be your top tight end claim this week. No problem with him. Hunter Henry, I think he's a really good tight end. Maybe not on the greatest of passing teams there. That's the issue. But, hey, generally beggars are choosers at this point, and tight end may be thinner. If he's still out there, I think you're probably lucky and you're going to grab him. I think the guys who are going to be out there, the last 2 you have here, Dan Arnold, Donald, thank God he's not Carolina. That was killing me. Dan Arnold and Sam Donald destroying me here. How much of that offense does he know? And the first thing he's got to learn is blocking, right? It's the first thing you have to learn as a tight end there. So, no, I'm going to stay away from him. I just don't see the passing being there. Jacksonville's a mess right now with Urban and everything that's going on there. Juwan Johnson's probably, all the tight ends. Maybe you're playing in a 2 tight end league. Guys like Johnson are available. Not anxious
gross
to get him. Those are gross. And I play in one of those. I want to strangle the commissioner of that league. Really, I want to strangle him for a lot of reasons. But 2 tight ends, 2 defenses. He plays 2 defenses for crying out loud, and 2 kickers.
Why are people trying to artificially make things worth more than they are? I hate that. If something's not worth, again, if you don't like playing with defenses, don't play with more. Just switch to IDP, even just 3 guys to start. Start with individuals. I don't like when people do that. Real quick, Dalton Schultz. This is another guy, too. 3 touchdowns the last 2 weeks here. Great matchup against the Giants this week. Still roster percentage is relatively low with Logan Thomas possibly out again, with Gronk definitely out again. Is Schultz another guy you feel like you can rely on along with Knox?
I do. Dak's looking for him. If they're taking away the outside receivers, Lamb, Cooper, Schultz is wide open down the numbers. He's finding out those seams there, and Dak wants to hit him. Jarwin, not the threat we thought he would be.
Yeah, I was surprised. I thought they would go back to Jarwin. All of us last year were saying, Dalton who? But you know what? It's Dalton Schultz. Say his name, everybody. And that was just the appetizer when it comes to the waiver wire. But we've got the entree when we return, the running backs and the wide receivers. George and I are going to put our bibs on and go to work because we're hungry for talent. We'll be right back right after this.
SportsGrid.com. Betting insights and entertainment at your fingertips 24/7 as our team covers the most important topics in sports wagering. Real-time odds, predictive betting models, expert picks, and more. Want the edge? Then get on the grid. SportsGrid.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to Fantasy Sports Today right here on Sports Grid. And, of course, after the show, you want to stay with us and keep us around. And The best way to do that is, of course, by making sure that you follow us on all of our social media platforms. That includes on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok, everywhere. We are all over the place on Sports Grid. You get all the latest updates, breaking news, line changes, and more by following us again on Twitter at Sports Grid and at Sports Grid TV. That is the place. You get all the great videos, all the great clips too. And of course, if anything moves, if lines moves or things change or news breaks, Sports Grid is going to be there for you. So make sure you follow us wherever you get your social media fix. I know George follows us everywhere because he's a good man. He makes to stay on top of everything going on in the world of sports. And of course, George Kurtz, when it comes to the world of sports, when it comes to running backs, you can never have enough. You can never have enough. And of course, here we are. It's week 5, and we're still looking for more. And David Montgomery, some bad news earlier in the week. I guess it depends on how you look at it. Good news that it wasn't a season-ending injury, but bad news because he's going to be out for 4 to 5 weeks with a knee injury. So that opens up the door for, obviously, Damian Williams, who is probably at the top of everybody's board. He wasn't the only guy, too. Joe Mixon's been banged up. We also had Chris Carson banged up. He's on that short week with Seattle, so maybe Alex Collins becomes in this mix. But here's a list of some guys off the waiver wire. We'll start with Damian Williams, Jeremy McNichols. He is playing for Houston against, for the Tennessee Titans against Jacksonville. Then you got Samaje Perine of the Cincinnati Bengals versus Green Bay. Chris Evans potentially as well getting involved in that backfield, and Ty Montgomery at Washington. But I'm going to start with Damian Williams, who then got banged up in that game that he came in for to relieve the injured David Montgomery. Had, I think, a bruised quad it was or something to that effect. So he's not 100%, but it looks like he's going to play. Now, when he did carry the football, certainly looked good doing so. Certainly the Bears, I think, getting back to running the football is imperative no matter who's playing the quarterback position for them. So Damian Williams is intriguing, but we all feel like there's a good chance, George, this is a short window. So let's take it this way. Let's start with, if you are a team with a losing record right now and you've had some running back injuries, how aggressive in terms of your fab percentage would you be on Damian Williams?
Well, you brought up the key scenario, right? You're 1-3, you're 0-4. You're 0-4. It doesn't matter. You have to win this week. You have to win this week. You can start looking forward to fantasy, hockey, basketball, baseball next season because you're done. All right, you're not going to go anywhere with 0-5. I'd break the bank. Would break the bank if I need a running back for this. Don't have a choice. All right, they're going up against the Raiders, Chicago, so it's not the worst matchup on the planet. So would break the bank. Now, one of the hardest questions to answer is I get them on Twitter all the time. I don't mind, but when someone asks you what percentage should I bid, I don't know your league. I don't know how many other guys need a running back. I don't know if your league barely pays attention. Well, hey, you can get away with it. You know, every now and then, I don't know that. And there are leagues like that. You know, some weeks are very, very quiet. Some weeks are, everybody in the league pays attention. Everyone's bidding on everybody every week. Well, then you got to bid more. But for most cases, I think you have to bid a lot for Damian Williams. He's the hot name. Everybody's talking about him, no matter where you are. And what's your worst case scenario? He's going to start the rest of October. That's at least 3 or 4 weeks you're going to get out of him. And if you're 1-3
Right.
or 0-4, you need to win now. I'll worry about November when November comes, Joe. I'm taking him. If I need a running back, that's what we're describing here. You need one. It's not like you're fine. He's going to be a flex fee or he's going to be a reserve for you. You need a running back to start. I'm breaking the bank for him. I'm making sure he's on my team.
I agree. I think he's guaranteed the touches. And I think that's the thing when you look at this group. He's the only one. He's the one that's guaranteed the touches. So he's the one that I would be proactive in terms of going after, especially in that scenario that I posed to George, which is if you are 0-4, 1-3, things have not gone your way, or you're one of these teams that has David Montgomery or has lost another running back recently to injury, this is the situation I think you can make it better, at least for a short period of time. Is his upside RB1? No. At best, probably some sort of, high-end RB2, you imagine is what Damian Williams could be over those few weeks when you look at the matchups ahead of him, at least as well. That being said, George, let's switch gears and talk about the guys in Cincinnati, because for those people who have Joe Mixon, how valuable right now is making sure that you add either Chris Evans or Samaje Perine for insurance. Some people like to do the handcuff, some people don't. I mean, I'm more of the person to handcuff really good backup running backs on other teams, not necessarily guys that I have on my own, because not everybody is easily replaceable. I don't think you go from Joe Mixon to Samaje Perine, all of a sudden Samaje Perine becomes Joe Mixon. That never happens for the most part anyway. However, this is a unique situation here. So let's talk about these guys in the Bengals. How do you approach them? And obviously approach the Joe Mixon situation not only this week, but potentially for the rest of the season.
Yeah, you and I, by the way, we approach handcuffs the exact same way. I have a lot of Alexander Madison, Tony Pollard, A.J. Dillon, but not necessarily because I have Ezekiel Elliott Aaron Jones, and Dalvin Cook. It's just like I like to take the best back available when I go, not the best handcuff. And those guys, in my mind, are three of the best backups in the NFL. Now, if there was one player, one running back that I did not want to get hurt, might have been Joe Mixon. Not that I think he's great or anything, but I have him on a lot of teams. Probably on 4 of the 11 teams I'm playing on. So this one hurts. This one hurts because I got to replace this guy. All right, they're playing Green Bay this week, so it's a decent matchup. I'm going to go Perrine first here. I'm not breaking the bank, mind you, because this Mixon thing looks like it's maybe just a 1-week injury. But I'm going to need him because I don't have great backups in not all of those leagues that I have Mixon. Where I can survive this. And I got to cover just in case the injury's longer than we think, or he gets re-injured next week when he comes back in. So I'm going to have to go after Perrine. Like I said, this is not Damian Williams here. I'm not breaking the bank here. But in at least 2 of those leagues, I really do have to make sure I get the guy. So I'm probably going to have to go, a third of my budget, maybe even 40% of it, if I want to really make sure I get the guy. I don't think people are going to go higher than that. It's a gamble with Fab, but we don't know. I will have to look at other teams. Who might be in it with me? How much Fab do they have left? If you're in a league, you've been in a league with the same teams for a while, you should have an idea. If I've been in a league with Joe Peacemeal for a while and Joe needs a running back, I might know what his bidding history is. All right, I might have an idea. No, Joe's gonna go for the broke guy. He's gonna do it. I know he's gonna do it. He's gonna go sick to me, and I'll know that. Or he might be, no, Joe's a quiet guy. He goes to the $10 to $15 somewhere around there. He never breaks the bank. Okay, I have an idea of how much I got to go now, 25, 28% to make sure I win that. So that's the game you play here with Fab. But Perrine is going to be somebody over Evans that I'm going to have to go out and get. And Evans will be a backup for me. He'll be that guy if, okay, I can't get him. I better bid a couple of dollars on Evans as well. I know I have him in a deep league on my taxi squad. I'll have to elevate him this week. But, I'll be very interested in both these guys, but much more so in Perrine.
I think the idea is if you don't get Perrine or you put the contingency bid in for Chris Evans, that you throw a buck or two on Evans just in case. And I think that's the way you play it because there's not necessarily a situation where you could look at it and go, Perrine all of a sudden becomes this great running back. Like I said, I don't think he's that kind of guy. And to blow 30 or 40% of your budget on a guy like that for maybe 1 week, I don't care how desperate you are. If you don't have a third running back to play, then that was bad roster construction. You're already in a bad spot. And I understand some people like to do the 0 RB thing, which to me is just a cop-out for not having a strategy or an approach. But I certainly would look at this situation this week as really kind of avoiding Cincinnati if I can, because somebody's going to probably overspend. If anything, maybe you add Chris Evans on the down low, because that's a guy they did put draft capital in, and you never know how these guys – we've seen Samaje Perine before. Nothing really special. Nothing jumps off the page. Williams is the guy that I think has a little bit more to offer. There's another running back who's not on this list that I want to bring up for a second. It's Kenneth Gainwell, who had a really good week 1 and a really good week 4. He is getting involved in that Eagles offense. And if you're in a PPR league, I would much rather go spend some money on him because I think he could bring me back double-digit points, whereas Perine, I'm not so sure about. Do you think that Kenneth Gainwell is also probably rostered in about 30% of leagues at most right now, is also a viable addition this week? Maybe if you are not interested in spending quite as much as it might take to get a Williams or to get a Perine on your roster.
Yes, I do. He's got speed to burn, Gainwell. You mentioned it has to be a PPR league. He's not your traditional running back. Actually, it doesn't matter. Phil Davis is not running the ball. Right? They're not running the ball.
That's a good point, George.
They're not. It's weird. Weird how they've abandoned the run in really back-to-back games. Is it because they were playing the Cowboys and then playing the Chiefs, and they knew they were going to have to score 30-plus points and was going to throw the ball all over the place? They played the Panthers this week. I'm looking here, right? I think that's what it is. So Panthers, I know they got shredded by the Cowboys, so there's might be room to run there. But Gainwell out of the backfield, catching those passes, that's what I want there. And I think they're going to continue to use that. And as you said, I think the floor is decent. I'm not expecting 25 points, but I think 10, 11 is very possible here. PPR league, yes, I'm interested in Gainwell.
All right, let's talk about some of the wide receivers here in this mix. We've got Jamison Crowder out there in the free agent wire. You got Van Jefferson of the Rams, Randall Cobb coming off a good week, but I don't think I would necessarily be chasing that. Deontay Harris at Washington, Khalif Raymond at Minnesota. I had an interesting conversation with some of my Fantasy Pros colleagues this week earlier on the podcast about those Detroit wide receivers, Quintez Cephas, Khalif Raymond, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had some good moments in that game this past weekend. But George, Khalif Raymond is actually a guy out of desperation I had to pick up in 2 leagues and start on the waiver wire, and I was very lucky, I think, to get the 2 touchdowns out of him Do you see any value in either of those three Detroit wide receivers on the free agent wire?
Is there value? Yes, but which one that week? That's my
Hmm.
problem. You're sort of playing the guessing game. Which one that week is Goff going to find here? All right, they played Minnesota this week. Okay, is it going to be Cephas? He's the guy I would have, 2 weeks ago it was all about Cephas. Now that's changed. And you're playing that kind of game. That's the game there. You can't win that game every week. You just can't win it every week. And it's frustrating. And it's Detroit. Let's face it. Who wants to have a lion on their team? All right, so that's my issue there is which guy to go here. I'd rather go with Crowd. I think Crowder gets a bad, sort of a bad rap. Yes, he's on the Jets. I get it. And the Jets, Jet, the Mets. All right, it's a mess there. But still, I think you want to go another guy, PPR league, safe floor. He's going to get double-digit points. He's going to get those catches there, and I kind of like that. I'd rather have a safe floor guy than a guy, he may get 18, but just as equally a good chance he's going to get 3. I don't want that. Generally, with the guys I'm picking up, I want the safe floor. I'll take 10, 12 points. You tell me that's what I'm getting here? 11?
Agreed.
Fine, good. I can build my roster around that then. Van Jefferson, I am very interested in him. Woods is not the guy. He's just not the guy for Stafford. This is what you worry about. He was the guy for Goff, but he's not the guy for Stafford. Stafford doesn't really look at him. He only has eyes for Kupp. And then the second guy he's looking at is Van Jefferson. That's all he has. And Woods is an afterthought. I don't think Woods' skills have deteriorated. I don't think he's out of the game plan. But Stafford, his BFF, is Kupp, and then he's looking for Van. He's just not looking for Woods. And let's face it, Cobb, I think last week was his big game. I don't know if you'll ever see a game this season, fantasy-wise, bigger than last week.
There's another name in just 19% of leagues that's rostered right now, and it's Rashad Bateman, who I think is a really sneaky ad this week where a lot of people are going to be wasting fab on Josh Gordon, wasting fab on some other wide receivers, chasing Randall Cobb. I think a $2 or $3 bid on Rashad Bateman, who probably won't even show up when you sort him in your home league, right? Because he hasn't played yet. But Rashad Bateman is exactly the kind of wide receiver that I feel like the Baltimore Ravens desperately need. They need somebody who is a possession wide receiver. They need somebody who can move the chains a little bit for them and give them another option in the passing game. To me, George, I think Bateman is that sneaky ad this week that can really make a difference.
Not to mention, you want to add him before he has the game, right?
Right.
You go before, you get it
for a buck or
bucks.
two. Proactive, not reactive, right?
Right. You wait till next week, and I know they're playing Indianapolis Monday night, but if he has any kind of game there, you got to add a 0 to that couple of bucks. Now it's 10, now it's $20 to get him. So yeah, he's a guy. If he's available, get him this week. You got nothing to lose. It's going to cost you $1 or $2. You don't like it, you get rid of him next week or the week after, whatever it might be. But I completely agree with you. Get him now while he's cheap.
Proactive, not reactive. That is the secret to the waiver wire. When George and I come back, we'll banter a bit more, but we're not done yet. We're not even close to halfway done here on Sports Grid. So use that fab properly. When we come back, we're going to talk more right here on Fantasy Sports Today about the players that can make a difference for you
SportsGrid.com. Betting insights and entertainment at your fingertips 24/7 as our team covers the most important topics in sports wagering. Real-time odds, predictive betting models, expert picks, and more. Want the edge? Then get on the grid. SportsGrid.com.
Welcome back, Fantasy Sports Today. I'm George Kurtz. So, yesterday, Craig Mish and I talked yesterday. We talked about the Yankee game here, and our producer, Brett Levy, I think he texted me at some point during the show. We were talking about it, and he was like, I think Anthony Rizzo is going to hit a home run around the pole. I believe we had some statistics that said Rizzo hits hard line drives down the line, which may pay off at Fenway Park around that pole. That pole is maybe 280 feet from home plate, and that's maybe. I know guys have tried to measure it, and the teams have stopped them, or Major League Baseball has stopped guys. I see them taking out tape measures and trying to measure both the wall and the pesky pole. They don't want you really knowing how really far it is. So anyway, I poo-pooed Brett a little bit. So I was wrong. Rizzo hit a home run around the pole. So did Giancarlo Stanton, by the way. Neither one would have been a home run. And Giancarlo certainly wouldn't have been a home run anywhere else. Maybe Rizzo's would have. So, Brett, Mea culpa, my bad. I am here to give you your props, Brett. Congratulations to you. So go for it.
Yeah, you said it best, George. Even a blind squirrel finds an acorn every now and then. But I just, had to let you know that sometimes the producer of FST knows a little bit. Not as much as the host, but a little bit, George. We're not all bad behind the scenes.
You're a Met fan. We listen. We give Brett so much grief. Some of it on air, some of it between the scenes for being the Met fan. The mess that the Mets are in. So I'll ask you real quick. Who do you want to be your new GM, vice president of operations, or whatever? And do you still want Alderson to be there?
Yeah, Sandy's not bad. He is obviously part of the World Series run. You hope you can rebuild. I guess Billy Beane's the hot name now after Theo Epstein turned it down. But we'll see what happens, George. I'm not too strong opinion. I just want them to turn it around. It's been a rough few years since 2016.
Truth is, I have nothing against the Mets. I know a lot of people in New York here, we hate them. But we'll be back after this. George Kurtz, Fantasy Sports Today.